March 31st, 1943, 12,000 feet above Burma, temperature minus 15 degrees Celsius. A young man dangled beneath a parachute, descending toward death at 16 feet per second. His name was Owen John Baggett, a farm boy from Graham, Texas, 23 years old, co-pilot with the 7th Bombardment Group of the United States Army Air Forces. At that moment, his left arm had been hit by a bullet. Blood soaked through his flight suit sleeve. In the sub-zero air, at high altitude, his blood crystallized into dark red ice. 4,000 feet below him lay the tropical jungles of Burma, Japanese occupied territory. In the sky around him, 13 Imperial Japanese Army Air Force Kiminus 43 Hayabusa fighters circled like vultures around dying prey. 2 minutes earlier, Baggett had witnessed the deaths of 2 comrades. Staff Sergeant Samuel Crowsdale, the top turret gunner, 19 years old, from Ohio, his parachute had just deployed when a burst of 20mm cannon fire tore through his body from below. The canopy bloomed in the air like a blood-red flower. Lieutenant Thomas Griffin, the bombardier, 26 years old, married just 3 months, still carried his wife's photograph in his pocket. A Hayabusa swept in from the side with a strafing run. 12.7mm bullets pierced his chest. His body convulsed on the parachute lines like a puppet with severed strings, then went completely still. Baggett watched it all. He knew he was next. This violated all the rules of war. The Geneva Convention clearly stipulated that parachuting airmen must not be attacked. They had lost their ability to fight and were protected persons. But in the skies over Burma in 1943, nobody cared about rules. A Hayabusa dove down from the clouds, heading straight for Baggett. 6 hours earlier, at Pendavis War Air Base in India, at 4:30 in the morning, the patrol alarm bell exploded through the barracks. Baggett jerked awake from his cot. Outside, it was still pitch black. In eastern India in March, the early morning was still cold. He rubbed his eyes and saw that pilot First Lieutenant Lloyd Jensen was already putting on his flight suit. "Big mission today," Jensen said, tension in his voice. "They're all big missions," Baggett replied, but he knew in his heart that Jensen was right. The briefing room was thick with smoke. 12B-24 Liberator bomber crews, Saturday, in folding chairs, staring at the map on the wall. The 7th Bombardment Group commander, Colonel Conrad F. Nick Raisin, stood before the map, pointer in hand. "Gentlemen," he began, "the target is the railway bridge at Pimana." The pointer tapped the map where a red circle marked the target, located between Rangoon and Mandalay, in the heart of Burma. "This bridge is a critical node in the Japanese supply line," Nick Raisin continued. "Destroying it will cut off their ability to transport supplies and troops to the front lines." Baggett stared at the map, his heart beginning to race. Pimana had 2 Japanese fighter bases, Mingaladen and Maktila, less than 50 miles from a target. "Intelligence anticipates," Neckerson said, "that we will encounter fierce resistance." "How fierce?" someone asked. "Very fierce." The colonel's answer was brief and forceful. The room fell silent. 12B-24s, Neckerson continued, "I will personally lead the formation. No fighter escort. The P-40s don't have the range. We're on our own." Another silence. Baggett glanced at Jensen. His pilot, Jensen's face had gone pale. "Bomb load," Neckerson said, 8 500-pound bombs per aircraft. "Target is the bridge's center span. We're going to blow it in one run. Takeoff time 0630. He checked his watch. "It's now 0445. Go eat breakfast. Do your pre-flight checks. God bless you all." At 6:15 on the tarmac, the Binus 24 Liberator was a steel beast, 67 feet long, wingspan 110 feet. 4 Pratt & Whitney Renas 1800 and 30 twin Wasp engines, 1,200 horsepower each. The fuselage was painted olive drab, the belly gray in the Indian sunlight. The metal skin reflected blinding light. Baggett walked around the aircraft, checking every detail: landing gear, tire pressure, engine cowlings, wing leading edges. The gunners were loading ammunition. The Binus 24 was equipped with 10 Browning M2 heavy machine guns, 50 caliber, 12.7 millimeter, twin guns in the nose, twin guns in the dorsal turret, twin guns in the belly bow turret, twin guns in the tail, and one on each waist position. 500 rounds per gun, 5,000 rounds total. Baggett climbed up the fuselage and entered the cockpit. Jensen was already in the left seat, beginning the pre-start checklist. Fuel, full load, 2,750 gallons. Engine warm-up, complete. Guns, loaded and tested. Oxygen, sufficient at 6:28分. Colonel Necrezon's aircraft engines roared to life with a deafening thunder. 4 engines fired up in sequence. The entire airfield was drowned in the engine's roar. At precisely 6:30, the lead aircraft began taxiing. The other planes followed. Baggett felt his heartbeat pounding inside his flight suit. Jensen pushed the throttles forward. The aircraft began to move. Runway, takeoff, climb. 12 B-24s formed tight formation in the morning sky. Target, Pimana. Distance, 320 miles. Flight time, 2 hours 15 minutes. Heading east, flying toward the rising sun, flying toward battle. At 8:35 a.m., over the Burmese border, the intercom crackled. Navigator to pilot, entering Burmese airspace. Baggett looked out the window. Below was rolling green jungle, occasionally visible villages and roads. Stay alert, Jensen said over the intercom. From now on, anything could be the enemy. The gunners began scanning the sky. In the top turret, 19-year-old Staff Sergeant Samuel Crosdale gripped the controls, ready to fire at any moment. In the ball turret, 22-year-old Sergeant William Costello curled up in the cramped transparent sphere, guns aimed below. In the tail position, 24-year-old Sergeant James Wilkins occupied the loneliest and most dangerous position, back to the crew, alone, facing, pursuing enemy aircraft. At the waist positions, 21-year-old Corporal Robert Johnston on the left side and 20-year-old Corporal Frank Talbert on the right. 10 men, 1 aircraft, deep behind enemy lines. At 8:42, Jensen's voice came through. Pilot to all crew to get at area, 20 miles ahead. Prepare for bomb run. Baggett checked the altimeter. 14,000 feet. Temperature, -8 degrees Celsius. Bombardier, Lieutenant Thomas Griffin, lay at the transparent bomb site. In the nose, I see the bridge, he said. Straight ahead 12 miles. Suddenly, Costello in the ball turret shouted, Enemy aircraft, enemy aircraft. 5 o'clock low. Baggett jerked his head around. 13 black dots approached rapidly from below the clouds. Imperial Japanese Army Air Force, Nakajima Kimonos, 43, Hayabusa fighters. Formation attack. All gunners stand by. Jensen roared. The first wave of attack came suddenly and violently. 3 Hayabusas dove from 6 o'clock directly behind at high speed. Tail gunner Wilkins immediately opened fire. The twin 50 caliber machine guns roared with an air-tearing sound. Tracers drew orange arcs. 1 Hayabusa was hit, white smoke pouring from its engine. But it continued attacking. 20-millimeter cannons fired, shells exploding around the Binus 24. 1 shell punched through the left wing, leaving a fist-sized hole near the fuel tank. Left wing hit. Baggett shouted. Self-sealing tanks functioning. Jensen asked, For now, yes. Another wave attacked, this time from head-on. 4 Hayabusas dove in formation. The nose twin guns opened fire. Bombardier Griffin, aimed at the bombing target while operating the machine guns. One Hayabusa was hit and tumbled through the air, but three kept coming. 20 mm shells rained down. The cockpit glass suddenly shattered. Baggett felt a burning pain on his face. Glass shards cut his cheek. Freezing wind howled into the cockpit. The -8-degree temperature instantly turned the cockpit into an icebox. Hold course, Jensen said through clenched teeth, gripping the control yoke with both hands. Target 30 seconds, Griffin shouted. Another wave attacked. Two Hopesas struck from 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock simultaneously. Left and right sides, waist gunners Johnston and Talbert fired in both directions. The recoil from the machine guns shook the entire fuselage. Empty shell casings bounced and clattered inside the cabin. 15 seconds to bomb release, Griffin shouted. Jensen desperately kept the aircraft steady. Despite the roaring engines, despite the exploding shells, despite the shaking fuselage, the countdown continued. 10 seconds. A Hayabusa dove from above, aiming at Baggett's side of the cockpit. Top turret gunner Croisdale rotated his turret and fired upward. Tracers hit the Hayabusa's engine cowling, sparks flying, but the fighter kept diving. 5 seconds. 20 mm shells punched through the wing and hit engine number 2. The engine cowling exploded instantly. The propeller seized. Engine 2 failure, Baggett shouted. The aircraft began to list left. Jensen used all his strength to hold the control yoke. The countdown continued. 3 seconds. Another shell punched through the fuselage and hit the oxygen system. The oxygen lines ruptured. High-pressure oxygen sprang out. Oxygen system failure. Someone shouted over the intercom. Bombs away. Griffin pressed the bomb release button. 8 500-pound bombs dropped from the bomb bay. The aircraft suddenly lifted, relieved of 4,000 pounds. Bombs clear. Griffin confirmed. Clear the target area, Jensen shouted. He shoved the control yoke, the aircraft banking hard right. But it was too late. Engine number 3 was hit by a string of 20 mm shells. The engine compartment exploded, flames pouring out. Engine 3 on fire. Baggett shouted, "Fire suppression," Jensen ordered. Baggett pressed the engine fire suppression button. Carbon dioxide was injected into the engine compartment, but the fire was too big. Suppression ineffective. Jensen shut down engine 3, cutting off fuel supply, but the fire kept burning. Now only 2 engines remained, Burrs 1 and 4. A 4-engine bomber with only 2 engines couldn't maintain altitude or speed. The aircraft began to descend. Altitude dropped rapidly from 14,000 feet, quickly falling to 13,000. "We're losing altitude," Baggett said. Jensen didn't answer. All his attention was on keeping the aircraft stable. With both engines on the same side, the aircraft was severely unbalanced. He had to constantly correct course, or the plane would spiral. "Where's the formation?" Jensen asked. Baggett looked out. The other B-24s had already gone, continuing west, returning to India. This was standard procedure. A damaged aircraft couldn't drag down the whole formation. They were on their own. 12,000 feet. Another wave of Hayabas dove down. 5 of them. Tail gunner Wilkins fired frantically, but there were too many enemies. 20 mm shells tore through the tail section. Sergeant Wilkins' shout suddenly cut off in the intercom. "Wilkins, respond!" Jensen shouted. Silence. Someone checked the tail. Waist gunner Johnston stumbled toward the rear. 30 seconds later, his voice came through, trembling. "Wilkins is dead." "Confirm." "Confirmed." "His head." "Oh God." 11,000 feet. Another Hayabusa dove from head on. Nose gunner Griffin returned fire, but that Hayabusa's 20 mm cannon hit the target faster. Shells punched through the nose and exploded. Griffin's scream echoed through the intercom. Then silence. "Griffin," Jensen shouted. No answer. 10,000 feet. Engine number 1 suddenly started smoking black. The engine temperature gauge needle jumped into the red zone. Engine 1 overheating. Baggett said, "Shut it down," Jensen said. his voice very calm, the calm of desperation. Baggett shot down engine 1. Now only engine 4 remained. One engine. A 70,000-pound bomber running on one 1,200 horsepower engine. This violated the laws of physics. 9,000 feet. All crew prepared to bail out, Jensen said. Repeat, all crew prepared to bail out. This is an order. Baggett looked at Jensen. What about you? I'll keep her flying as long as I can, Jensen said. Give you guys time. That's not right, Baggett said. We jump together. That's an order, Lieutenant, Jensen said. 8,000 feet. The fuselage began to shake violently. Engine 4 let out a desperate shriek. It wouldn't last much longer. Jump now, Jensen roared. Everyone bail out immediately. Baggett unbuckled his safety belt. Come with me, he said to Jensen. That's an order. Screw the orders, Baggett said, grabbing Jensen's flight suit. 7,000 feet. Engine 4 began to catch fire. Flames spread backward along the wing. The fuel tanks could explode at any moment. Baggett and Jensen stumbled toward the rear, through the central passageway where no one remained, past the waist gun positions where the floor was covered with shell casings. The rear door was already open. 6,000 feet. Top turret gunner Crowsdale stood by the door. Jump fast, Baggett shouted. Crowsdale nodded and leapt out. Other crew members bailed out in sequence. Costello, Johnston, Talbot. Finally, Jensen and Baggett, 5,500 feet. Jump together, Jensen said. Together, Baggett agreed. They stood at the cabin door, looking at the Burmese jungle 12,000 feet below, then jumped together. The moment he leapt from the door, Baggett felt the whole world go quiet. The engine roar disappeared. The gun thunder disappeared. Only the wind. He tumbled through the air, sky and earth alternating in his vision. 3 seconds later, he pulled the parachute ripcord. The canopy deployed, jerking him hard. His descent suddenly slowed. Now he hung from the parachute lines, drifting toward the ground at 16 feet per second. He looked up. The Binus 24 was still in the air, trailing long black smoke, like a wounded bird. Then the fuel tank exploded. An orange fireball bloomed at 4,000 feet. The aircraft disintegrated, debris scattering in all directions. Baggett witnessed the death of his aircraft. Then he looked around. Other parachutes were scattered across the sky. He quickly counted. 8 parachutes, including himself. 9 men. Griffin and Wilkins hadn't made it out, but at least 9 had survived. Baggett began thinking about what to do after landing. They were in Japanese-occupied territory. Capture was only a matter of time, but at least they were alive. Then he heard it, that sound, the whine of engines. He looked up. 13 Hayabusa fighters were still circling. They hadn't left. Instead, they were descending, diving toward the parachutes. No, Baggett said quietly. This was impossible. This violated all the rules. But the first Hayabusa had already opened fire. Machine gun tracers shot toward the nearest parachute. That was Croadil, the 19-year-old top turret gunner. Bullets hit his body. Blood sprayed in the air. His body convulsed on the parachute lines, then went still. The canopy became a shroud. No, 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 Baggett kept saying. Another Hayabusa attacked another parachute. That was Thomas Griffin, the bombardier, the one with his wife's photo in his pocket. 20mm shells hit him directly in the chest. His body went limp like a puppet, with cut strings. Baggett watched it all, helpless. He could only hang there and wait for his own death. Another Hayabusa dove down from the clouds, heading straight for Baggett. The distance closed rapidly, from 1,000 yards to 400. Baggett could see the pilot clearly now, could see the canopy, could see the red sun markings on the wings. 400 yards. The guns opened fire. Tracers flew toward Baggett. He instinctively tried to dodge. But how can you dodge bullets on a parachute? A bullet grazed his left arm. Searing pain He saw his flight suit sleeve suddenly bloom with a blood flower. He was hit, but he was still alive. The Hayabusa roared past him, then climbed, preparing for a second attack. Baggett looked down at his wound. The bullet had penetrated his forearm. Blood poured out, but the bone seemed intact. He used his right hand to press hard on the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. He looked up. That Hayabusa was turning back. This time it would ensure the kill. Baggett suddenly thought of something. His right hand reached for his waist where there was a leather holster. Colt M 19111, A1 pistol, 45 caliber, standard issue for flight officers as a self-defense weapon. 7 rounds, 1 in the chamber, 6 in the magazine. He had never thought he would use this gun. It was meant for if captured as a last-moment self-defense, or worse, for suicide. But now, Baggett drew the pistol. His left hand was still bleeding. His right hand gripped the gun. That Hayabusa was 300 yards away, approaching. Baggett knew this was meaningless. Shooting at a fighter plane, traveling 300 kilometers per hour with a pistol. This was insane, but he had nothing left to lose. The distance closed. 150 yards. 100 yards. He could see the pilot now. That Japanese pilot was slowing down. He was reducing speed. Then the canopy opened. That pilot opened the canopy. He wanted to confirm the kill, wanted to see the American's face clearly before firing. Baggett made a decision. He decided to play dead. He let his body go limp, head hanging on his chest, arms dangling. His right hand still gripped the pistol, but hidden at his side. The Hayabusa flew closer and closer. 30 yards, 20 yards, 10 yards. Baggett watched through slitted eyes. Watching that fighter plane, watching that pilot. He could see the pilot's face clearly now, very young, probably only in his early 20s, wearing a flight cap, goggles pushed up on his forehead. He was leaning forward, looking toward Baggett, checking if the American was really dead. The Hayabusa almost hovered beside Baggett. The pilot was staring at him. Now, Baggett's head snapped up. His right hand came up. Aim squeezed trigger. Bang! The pistol's recoil numbed his wrist. That Japanese pilot's body suddenly jerked. Bang! Second shot. Bang! Third shot. Bang! Fourth shot. 4 shots. In less than 2 seconds, at least one hit the pilot. Baggett saw blood spray in the cockpit. The pilot's head snapped backward violently. Then that Hayabusa suddenly lost control, nose down, beginning to roll. The engine sound became a shriek. The propeller seized. The aircraft entered a spin, plummeting toward the ground. Baggett watched, stunned. The Hayabusa crashed into the jungle 3,000 feet below. Explosion. An orange fireball shot skyward. He had done it. He had really done it. With a pistol, he had shot down a fighter plane on a parachute. This was impossible, but he had done it. The other Hayabusa fighters seemed shocked by this scene. They stopped attacking, climbed, formed up, then flew east, back to base. The sky suddenly went quiet. Only the sound of wind. Baggett continued descending. He looked down at his left arm, still bleeding, but the flow had slowed. Looked at the pistol in his hand, the barrel still smoking. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The jungle below grew clearer. Tree canopy, rivers, paths. Altitude dropped rapidly. 1,000 feet, 500 feet. He began preparing for landing. Feet together, knees slightly bent, ready to roll and absorb impact. 100 feet, impact. Baggett hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his legs, but he was alive. He rolled several times and stopped, lying on Burma's red earth, gasping for breath. Alive. He was really still alive. 30 seconds later, he heard sounds. Footsteps, many footsteps, and shouting, Japanese. He struggled to stand. His left arm hurt terribly, but he could still move. He saw them, Japanese soldiers, at least 30. carrying rifles, running toward him. Bagot looked at the pistol in his hand. 3 rounds left. He could fight, but it would be meaningless. He slowly raised both hands. The pistol slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. Japanese soldiers rushed up, roughly threw him down, tied his hands with rope. They shouted. Someone kicked him. Someone hit him with a rifle butt. But Bagot didn't care anymore. He was alive. That was enough. 2.5 years later, September 1945, Singapore, Pelgo Camp. Lieutenant Bagot weighed only 90 pounds. He had originally weighed 175. 2.5 years as a prisoner of war nearly killed him. Starvation, disease, torture, humiliation, but he survived. On the day Japan surrendered, 8 OS agents parachuted into Singapore. They liberated 38 prisoners of war. Bagot was one of them. On the transport plane flying to India, an intelligence officer Saturday down next to Bagot. "Lieutenant," he said, "there's something I must tell you." "What?" "You're famous." "What?" "You're shooting down an enemy plane with a pistol," the officer said. Colonel Melton's Pinus 40 fighter was in the area that day. He witnessed the whole thing. He saw you fire, saw that Hayabusa crash. He went back and reported it. "You're the only person in World War II to shoot down an enemy aircraft with a pistol." Bagot was silent for a long time. "What about Crowsdale and Griffin?" he finally asked. "I'm sorry," the officer said. Bagot nodded. "That wasn't heroic," he said quietly. "That was just desperation." After the war, Owen Bagot stayed in the Air Force. He rarely talked about that mission, rarely talked about that shot. When people asked, he always said, "I just wanted to survive." In 1973, Bagot retired with the rank of colonel at age 53. He returned to Texas and became a defense contractor manager. He sponsored children, participated in community service, lived a quiet life. About whether he really shot down that Hayabusa, historians argued endlessly. Japanese records showed no aircraft losses that day, but there were witnesses. Colonel Melton saw it all. There were also rumors that after Bagot was captured, the Japanese Pew Alps camp commander, a colonel, treated him with particular respect because of his accurate shooting. This fit the Japanese Bushite spirit of respect for brave enemies. What's the truth? Perhaps there will never be a definitive answer, but one thing is beyond doubt. On March 31st, 1943, at 12,000 feet over Burma, a 23-year-old Texas boy dangled from a parachute, wounded in the left arm, facing death, and chose to fight with a pistol against a fighter plane. This wasn't madness. This was the purest manifestation of the human spirit. When all hope was lost, when death was imminent, when everything seemed futile, he still chose to resist, still chose to fire, still chose to believe, even if there was only a 1 in a million chance. In that moment, Owen Bagot transcended heroism. He became a legend, not because he shot down the plane, but because he dared to pull the trigger. In 2006, Owen John Bagot died at age 86. He was buried in the Sam Houston National Cemetery in Texas. His headstone bore his rank and years of service. It didn't mention that shot, but those who know will never forget. In the history of human warfare, there are many incredible stories. The Trojan horse, the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, the Dunkirk evacuation. But few stories challenge our perception of possibility, like Owen Bagot's story. One man, one pistol, one parachute against a fighter plane. It sounds like a Hollywood script, but it really happened on March 31st, 1943, in the skies over Burma. That day, the laws of physics were broken. Common sense was overturned. The impossible became possible because one man refused to accept death. He raised his pistol, aimed at the sky, and pulled the trigger. 4 shots changed history.